Looks like you're expecting a review. Can I help you with that? Can I help you with that? Hello, interwebs, and welcome to my review of Star Trek Lower Decks, Episode 6, Terminal Provocations. Hello, interwebs, and welcome to my review of Star Trek Lower Decks, Episode 6, Terminal Provocations. As always, I'm going to give you my spoiler-free thoughts up front, and then we're going to dive into the spoilery stuff, because oh boy, is there some really fun spoiler stuff for this episode. So, non-spoiler stuff. This episode, as always, I've just been really enjoying all of Star Trek Lower Decks stuff, and this episode, I think, kind of fit into the mold of last episode where there were clearly three planes of action going on. There was the bridge crew, there was stuff with Rutherford and Tendi, and then there was stuff with Mariner and Boimler, and they kind of were all fairly separate storylines. But unlike last episode where they were all kind of just completely separate things that didn't really touch on each other all that much other than just sort of setting of like them being on the ship and stuff, I really loved how all the different storylines in this episode kind of interweaved and intersected with each other, that they kind of all trickled down to each other and then trickled back up to each other in really fun and interesting ways. So I really just loved how while there were sort of three different stories going on, they all kind of played off of each other in very similar ways. The other thing too is, without getting too much into spoilers, a lot of them had especially the two main storylines with Rutherford and Tendi and then Boimler and Mariner, they had similar themes of technology gone amok, which is a recurring theme within all of Star Trek. We've seen it numerous times, and this episode was definitely playing on a lot of those tropes, but found like new ways to do it and different versions to do it, and or if it was like playing on a trope that we've already seen, because a little bit of a spoiler here, this gets into the holodeck does something awful, safeties get turned off, and there's something going wrong on the holodeck sort of episode, but it just takes it so much further than you would expect it to, that it's just really great. So yeah, I think just that's most of what I can say for the non-spoiler section. I just loved the structure of this. Some really great themes of technology gone amok. I think really the only thing that I can sort of say spoiler-free, I do have a couple other criticisms, but for the spoiler section. But the only non-spoiler criticism that I can really make about this episode is, again, we're kind of getting similar pairings up of the characters. We got Mariner and Boimler, and then Rutherford and Tendi, and then the bridge crew going on, and the bridge crew kind of jumping in here and there at different times, which is fine. I do like those character pairings, and I understand that they're trying to establish those character dynamics, but I feel like a little bit of a broken record here, because I do really want to see these duos get split off in different combinations, like getting Rutherford with Boimler or Mariner with Tendi. So hopefully next episode or in the next few episodes, we'll start to see a little bit more different pairings. Again, I understand that they're kind of trying to establish these dynamics with these characters, and again, I'll talk about that a little bit more in the spoiler section, because that is getting into spoilers. So I understand why that impetus is there, but I would kind of like to see the snow globe shaken up a little bit, as it were, to use a really weird metaphor there. So yeah, overall, a really great episode. I really liked how they intermingled stuff, a lot of funny stuff, and a lot of good tying of themes and tropes of Star Trek, but just either taking it a little bit further or finding a new way to hook into it. And also another thing too, a little bit of a meta commentary here that I can't really touch upon in the spoiler-free section, but I do think some of the meta commentary in this episode is quite fun as well, about Star Trek and Star Trek Lower Decks in particular. So that's my spoiler-free thoughts on this episode. So if you don't want to hear any more stuff about this episode before you've seen it, or are weird and have seen the episode but don't want spoilers for an episode you've already seen, which I totally understand, I'm here to accept you, totally get it. If any of that applies to you, feel free to stop the video here, and I will see you down in the comments or after you've seen the episode or next week. Okay, so like I said, a few things that I kind of hinted at in my spoiler-free section to talk about here in the spoilers. So let's jump into it. I'm going to talk about each storyline a little bit separately. I know they kind of intermingle, but I'm just going to talk about them separately. Let's start off with the bridge crew. So we have this situation where they're at a salvage yard. The Dothamir, I think that's the alien name, wants to salvage all these ships. They're like 100-year-old Starfleet ships. There's a couple Easter eggs in there, some older ships you can see in there from the TOS era. And Starfleet's like, no, it's our garbage. You can't salvage it. And honestly, I'm kind of on the side of the Dothamir. It's like, if you haven't touched this stuff in 100 years, I think we can salvage it. They may have gotten a bit aggressive about it because they started shooting off, using their deflector beam to shoot rubble at the Starfleet ship. But I kind of see their point. Like, come on, at some point, this is trash and we can deal with it. And I really just liked the tropes of the Starfleet bridge crew going on here. We have the security guard kind of acting like Worf, being like, let me attack it, let me phaser it, just please let me do anything. Just very Worf-esque in his delivery and sort of wanting to do something here. It was just a very fun recurring trope. I loved the captain being like, I'm so ethical and considerate that I'm not going to attack them, and just kind of like just sitting there, just taking the beating for so long. I'm sure it doesn't make a ton of sense if we really were to like stay on that level, that they would just sit there taking this beating for a really long time. So you could get into yeah, it's a little bit wishy-washy, but as like a background element that we keep recurring back to, I thought it was pretty funny and sort of played up that tropes. The only negative I would say about that is between this and last episode, it started to make, especially the captain of the character, feel a little bit less like a character and more tropey and a parody of a captain of Starfleet. We did such a good job in the earlier episodes of the show, kind of fleshing her out as her own individual personality. And then these two episodes, it feels like she's lost a little bit of her personality to just be like stock Starfleet captain. And that's fine, especially with, the show wanting to focus on lower decks. But considering the show did such a good job showing off her character earlier on, it feels a little bit off, just a hair off. It's not like it's a big problem, but it does feel a little bit hair off here to just have her be like saying really tropey lines like, I'm so ethical and considerate, it just feels like a little bit not tropey. Tropey's the wrong, well, it is tropey, but like a little bit more of an archetype character rather than the full fleshed out character that we had come to know the few episodes before. Again, it's not a major problem. It's just kind of being used for vehicles for jokes here and there, and obviously that wasn't meant to be the focus of the episode, was her character, but it did feel a little bit like it was playing in the archetype of the character. But overall, I just really love the bridge stuff. I thought it was a lot of fun going on. Oh, I forgot to also mention the cold open as well. I thought that was great. Them doing all the warp core sounds, and then Ransom freaking out about that. Commander Ransom freaking out about it, and kind of making fun of this thing that I think a lot of us Star Trek fans know, even if we don't know. I know because I edit with a lot of Star Trek sounds, but we all know, like, you watch Star Trek The Next Generation, and there's that like constant hum of the ship going on in the background at all times. Some like little sound editor just put in the little thing going on in the background of every single Starfleet ship, which was just a cool little subtle background piece, and I just like that they sort of made fun of it and how every show had their own individual one. I know a lot about that because I edit videos where like I put that sound in sometimes, so I know that there's like a different sound for different seasons of Next Generation and different sound for different seasons of Deep Space Nine, and Voyager and all that stuff. So I just found that kind of funny and very nerdy, very in-jokey for Star Trek. So I thought that was a good send up there. To Rutherford and Tendi storyline, this is the one that I actually thought was the best story of the episode. Definitely a hologram gone amok thing. I really liked that the story was instigated by Tendi not knowing how to spacewalk. So Rutherford wants to take her on the holodeck to impress her, which we're getting little hints throughout this episode and previous episodes that Rutherford likes Tendi, and Tendi's sort of thinking that Rutherford likes her because he just wants to be her friend. And we kind of get the implication, especially with their magnets sticking together in this episode, which I'm kind of getting a little ahead of myself there, but just get a little hints of like there's romantic feelings going on between these two characters, but one that Tendi is kind of a little bit blind to because she's just so excitable and just like wants some friendships, whereas Rutherford, I kind of get the hint that Rutherford is even if he isn't fully aware of it, he does kind of have a romantic feelings for Tendi. So I'm really liking how they're playing that out in the long game, that we're getting subtle hints of it, but it's not just like comedic, like, oh, they're dating right now. That is an arc for these characters of them sort of coming to understand that they like each other. So I think that that's a really, really great and sweet arc, and kind of gets to what I was talking about in the spoiler-free section about why I understand the writers of the show wanting to pair these characters off this way and constantly putting Rutherford and Tendi together because they want to build that arc. But I think it's kind of a rock and a hard place because the episodes are so much shorter and they only have 10 episodes as opposed to like the 13 that other shows get, like Discovery or Picard only had 10. But So I understand the like just kind of want to focus on this arc for the season. And you only have so much time to like switch things up. But I would have liked like maybe one episode where we switch things up, and maybe they'll do that in future episodes. But I would have liked it towards the middle of the season rather than constantly giving us the same sort of pairings off, and then later on changing them up if they change them up in the next few episodes, which I feel like they will, but maybe I'm wrong. So that's my one sort of misgivings there. Anyways, back to my discussion of Rutherford and Tendy in specific. So I like that the impetus of Rutherford wanting to take Tendy to hologram is like him being kind and wanting to like help her out, but also like this hints of this romantic stuff. Then we meet Badgie, who is the funniest thing I think I have ever seen. It's playing up the sort of Moriarty trope of holodecks, like holodecks gaining sentience, but Badgie is clearly a play on Clippy, that sort of Microsoft like paperclip guy who would always like try and help you, but ultimately is just really freaking annoying, and everyone always hated it, and they finally got rid of him. In fact, I worked at Microsoft for a few months as a video producer, and even at Microsoft, Clippy is like an in-joke there, and you're like, not a lot. It's like, don't talk about Clippy. We don't talk about Clippy here. So I thought, I thought that reference was like a nerdy reference that everyone would get, that like it wasn't just a Star Trek in-joke. Like a lot of nerds will get that joke even if they don't like Star Trek, but it was a very nerdy joke. So I just thought that was great. And then I just like the fun as like the ship is getting hit by the Dothamir stuff. Again, these sort of influencing from other storylines going on throughout the episode. That I did like that Clippy just became this deranged murderer and was just trying to kill them. One of my favorite jokes from that section was he says, "Fun fact, I want to kill you," and then Tendy says, "That wasn't a fun fact," or "That fact wasn't fun." I literally laughed out loud at that. So just a great whole section, and I liked the sort of play on like, "Oh, you're my father, and you're disappointing me," and the whole fight with Rutherford and Clippy was just very sweet and very like a send up, and like managed to weirdly hit me pretty hard, especially because it connected to his wanting to impress Tendy. And we got some cool references in there. We got to like we went to see a holographic Bajor and things like that, and it was just a very fun time. And I thought the Clippy setting up this sort of mechanical menace trope was a lot of fun. So that storyline was easily my favorite part of the episode. Badgie is hysterical, and I hope he comes back like more times than Moriarty did. Let me put it that way. I hope they pay off Clippy, why did I say Badgie? I hope they pay off Badgie better than they paid off Moriarty in Next Generation. Badgie will be this show's Moriarty. All right, speaking of technology gone amok, let's get to the Mariner and Boimler discussion of this episode. So we meet in the opening of this episode, or towards the opening of this episode, we meet Fletcher, who is initially characterized as this guy who's like a friend of Boimler's, who is like this all-around just good guy who everyone really likes, is able to sort of like play the peacekeeper sort of thing. And then as the episode went on, like he's like, oh, go to the concert, and there's that sort of running joke of like the choo 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 stuff going on, which I thought was hilarious, the band going on there. They come back and find Fletcher has been attacked and that he lost a warp core. And there's a small joke in here that I'm only going to mention it because I feel like some people might miss it, but I kind of liked the reference, and I literally just watched this episode last week, so I only remember it. But Mariner says, like, no one's going to worry about it. It's like a backup of a backup, which is a very, very, very deep cut reference to an episode of Deep Space Nine. I can't remember the name of the episode, but I did just watch it, where the three Cardassians come to try and do some technology stuff in the wormhole. It's in season 3 of Deep Space Nine, and one of the Cardassians is working with O'Brien, the most important man in Starfleet in all of human history, apparently, and you know, he puts in a backup, and the Cardassian is like, why do you want a backup of a backup? And, O'Brien's like, I always kind of want a backup of a backup.
What are the chances that both a primary system and its backup would fail at the same time?
Well, it's very unlikely, but in a crunch, I wouldn't like to be caught without a second backup.
So it was just, again, very deep cut of a reference. I can't even remember the episode. It was like the episode where, like, Sisko had to remember that he was, like, basically had to deal with the fact that he was the emissary, like, coming to terms with being the emissary for the Bajoran people. It's in season 3. I'm sure some people caught it, but I just caught it, and I was kind of impressed with myself, so I just gotta talk it out to all of you and just let you know how much of a Trekkie I am. Gotta prove my nerd cred. I don't know what voice that was. But yeah, deep cut joke that I spent way too much time explaining. And And so Fletcher, they go on this wild goose chase through some stuff. I thought it was kind of funny. But turns out Fletcher actually was trying to make himself smarter by downloading the computer into his brain and the computer core into his brain, but it sort of backfired and actually downloaded his brain into the computer core. And the computer core started going amok, kind of like another technology gone amok thing. And Fletcher's basically lying this whole time and is kind of a jerk and an asshole. They eventually shoot it out into space, and it stops the Dothamir ship from destroying the Cerritos. Which, again, I liked how it sort of influenced different storylines going on there. And then eventually Fletcher gets promoted for this thing, even though he was kind of a jerk, and gets sent to the Titan, which is Riker's ship that he became captain of in Star Trek Nemesis. But then he gets fired a week later. All right, sorry, I know I just kind of did a plot synopsis there. But I did not like how Fletcher was characterized in this episode, not in the sense of like he wasn't Starfleet, because that was kind of the point of this. I like that he was a character being used to show kind of in a meta commentary way what Starfleet is not about, because I know there's been a lot of criticism, and it feels like the writers of the show kind of knew that there would be, that the way that like Mariner and Boimler act with each other sometimes doesn't feel very Starfleet, like they fight with each other and everything. But I liked that Fletcher kind of proved a sort of juxtaposition to those characters, and showing like, no, Mariner and Boimler are very Starfleet, and yeah, they may get into some trouble and ignore the rules from time to time, but all in service of Starfleet's greater goals, whereas Fletcher's just kind of a jerk and doesn't really meet that baseline of goodness that he joked about earlier. So I really like that sort of meta commentary level of this episode, and also, again, pointing out that Mariner and Boimler, sort of giving them a common enemy to show that they can work together well, that it's not always going to be Mariner versus Boimler in every single episode, but they do work together well as a team, and I really liked that it showed them coming together as friends. I really hope that they don't put them in a romantic pairing, because I'm buying the Rutherford and Tendi romance. I don't like Boimler and Mariner all that much as a romance, and it would kind of feel weird if they kind of paired the four characters off in that way. It would be a little bit too weird. So I kind of like them staying friends. But I liked that it sort of like bonded them together, and it wasn't like the two of them versus each other in this episode, but that they had a common enemy and could work together, and also highlighted how very Starfleet they are. And again, sort of like addressing that criticism that I know many people have had with the show. Again, I'm not saying it's a bad criticism to have. I totally understand if that's a feeling that you were getting, that this isn't very Starfleet. But this episode was sort of a way to kind of address that criticism head on. And considering they wrote this before the season came out, I'm sure it was something in the writer's room that they were thinking about and addressing. And so I like that kind of came through here. Getting back to my initial point, though, with all of this, is I didn't like how Fletcher was kind of characterized in the initial sense, because it kind of starts off the episode with, like, he's this peacekeeper guy. And I thought that was going to be the trait that played into the episode, that they could make a point of the fact that he's this peacekeeper and can kind of work both sides and kind of get people to come to an agreement. And I guess in a way he does with Mariner and Boimler, but that sort of characterization just gets tossed aside with him kind of like being worried that he's stupid, and being worried that, like, and being kind of a jerk and a liar, and he has this, like, inferiority complex going on, but none of that was, like, properly set up. And I know you don't have a lot of time in the first few minutes of a 25-minute comedy, but it feels weird to, like, set up this character trait for Fletcher, that he's this, like, peacekeeper, and then just completely disregard it and, like, give him this weird inferiority complex. It would have, I don't know, it was funny as the scene with the cat doctor was, like, her getting nachos in her fur and all that stuff. I thought that was a funny scene, but it would have probably worked a little bit better for me if they had, like, somehow set up in that scene somehow Fletcher's, like, worrying that he's dumb, or, like, this inferiority complex that he has, just something to kind of hint at what's to come later, because it did kind of feel weird that it was like, oh, I guess he thought that he was stupid, and that's why he connected his... There's just, like, no hint to it. Like, I got a hint throughout the... I kind of figured Fletcher was the one that was lying there, and nothing actually happened to him, that he was just lying about the core being stolen, but it would have been a little bit better if they had paid it off. I mean, this is like the minorest of minor nitpicks here. I'm nitpicking a single scene and how it didn't build up the rest of the episode, but it kind of threw me out a little bit with Fletcher's characterization. So I know I'm over harping on it, but it was like the one big nitpick that I could find thinking about this episode, because otherwise I liked everything else. I liked what it did for Mariner and Boimler's characters, and I liked, again, how it kind of interwove with the main story plot and sort of rescued the ship at the right moment, and kind of like paid off this good joke. And again, very well interweaving of all three of the storylines here. But I just didn't love how Fletcher was characterized, and I thought that they could have set it up a little bit better in the initial stages of the writing. Again, overly nitpicking it, but it was something that threw me. So that's everything that I have on this episode. Yeah, I like I said it before, I'm loving the series. I have some nitpicks here and there about this episode, but overall, this episode I think was absolutely fan-frickin-tastic. And I think my only general criticism that I have, that's just a continuing criticism, is I just kind of want different pairings between the different characters. So that's my sort of biggest takeaway. Loved what's going on here, but I just kind of want to shake things up a little bit. I mean, who doesn't like to shake things up? Get a little chew going on, if you know what I mean. I hope you don't know what I mean, but I'd like to hear what you thought about this episode down in the comments below. Please let me know what you thought of this episode. Also, don't forget to subscribe to this channel for more discussions of Star Trek and geek culture and LGBTQ topics and the potpourri of stuff that is my channel. I also do 2 podcasts, one called What the Frell, which is a Farscape rewatch podcast with Council of Geeks, another one called Behind the Reactor, which I do with Lower Loaded, where we do like news-related stuff. I just started that last week with him, so that's a lot of fun. Check those out. I also have a Patreon if you want to help me out there. But beyond all of that stuff, I am just glad that you stopped by, and I hope that you, as always, live long and prosper. Thank you so much to all of my patrons, especially Ashley Allen Bokikio, Miranda Janelle, Eli Berg-Moss, Ashlyn Solstice, Christina Dalliance, Greg Gillum, Stephen Clinard, Munir Amlani, Boyd and Mary Beth Earl, Wayne Twitchell, Ish the Mad, Buttoneer, Randy Thompson, Jemshin, Lorena Mesa, Mari Neckar, Wellington Marcus, John Steele, Michael Beam, William Stewart, Gavin Robinson, Jason Knott, Maeve, Subraxis, Tonya Trummer, Wen Dizzle-Bizzle, Gretchen Badger, Dante St. James, Polly Mina, Piston Twisted Garage, and Bree Beecher. Thank you all so much for your continued support.